Today we're going to look a little bit more at masks. We touched on them last time when we done the Rusty Suzanne texture. So what is a mask? Well, this is probably going to be easier to explain in Photoshop. So don't worry, this isn't a Photoshop tutorial, it's just a tool to help me explain. So what I have here is I have two textures. I have this brick texture and I have this concrete texture. Now if I somehow wanted to mix these two, I could use a mask. When I say mix, I want the concrete in certain areas and I want the brick in certain areas. I could use a mask. Well, my underlying texture is a brick and then I have the concrete, and what I can do is I can create a mask, and this will create a new kind of, not a layer, but a mask layer here. In Photoshop, if I alt click that, I will get the screen to show just this mask. Now what a mask is it's a black and white texture, okay, and it acts like a mask. So ultimately what will happen is anything white on this texture will allow the concrete to show, and anything black will mask the concrete and allow the brick to show. So if I just do something very simple here, let me create a brush. Let's bring it down a bit, and about 80% hardness, 85, 81, that'll work. And if I paint on this, creating this black and white texture, okay, if I come back to my concrete texture, you'll see that the concrete shows over the brick. So where I've got the black areas on the mask, it has hidden the concrete texture, allowing the brick to come through. Also, say I got that the wrong way round, I wanted the concrete in the middle and the brick on the outside, all I can simply do is invert that mask. So when we come back, we've got the concrete showing and the brick showing, and that's been reversed, it's been inverted. And that simply is what a mask is. What else can we show with this mask? Okay, it doesn't have to be stuff round, it can be anything you want really. Let's do some text. Well, brush script, that'll work. Just typing out blender benders here. Let me resize this so it's, and we'll come back to here. I probably wanted that black, so let me just go this way and do a grid fill, and there we go. Alright, so I've got this mask that says blender benders. So if I come back to the main texture, you can see that the brick is, the black area of the mask is allowing the brick to show through. And once again I could invert this. So we've got the concrete showing through as the blender benders. So that is a mask. It's basically a black and white texture that masks out some areas of the texture it's affecting and allows the underlying texture to come through. Alright, let's close out Photoshop here. So we're back in Blender, and I think we'll do something with these same two textures. So the obvious thing would be like a brick wall with kind of like cracked plaster, or you know, this kind of grungy industrial type effect. So I have here a cube, we can work with that. Let me just move it up off the grid a little. No real reason to, it's just my kind of preferred, I like things above the grid. Let's scale it on the X so it's thinner. Let's scale it on the not X, Shift X. Well, that didn't work. Yes, it did. So it's kind of taller, scale it on the wide, make it a bit wider, and just bring it up off the grid again. Alright, so we've got this wall. First thing we're going to need to do is unwrap it. So let me open up a UV image editor here. Let's go into edit mode. Let's do a basic unwrap, see what happens. I'm going to have to mark seams. So that could be simple enough. Let me just mark these 4 vertices. Control E, mark a seam. Control I to swap it over to the remaining 4 vertices. Control E, mark a seam. And then I probably want to mark a couple of seams on the edge of the wall. So let's just do these opposite ones for convenience. Control E, mark seam. Right. Okay, before I unwrap, I'll just quickly apply scale. Control A, rotation scale. I can do edit mode. Select all. U for unwrap. And there we go. We have wall unwrapped. Okay, so let's bring in a node editor. There we go. Let's add a material to this. And there we go. Alright. So first thing I want to do is bring in my brick texture. So I'm just going to drag that in from my desktop. Okay. And if we go into a texture, we'll see this. Material should be pretty much the same. Yep. I'm doing material node. Right, the reason I'm doing it material node is because what I actually want to do is scale this. I'll do that with a mapping node. I just did that by pressing Control T. So if I scale this, let's say 5. See how it looks. There we go. Probably a bit too much. Say 3. Okay, there we go. So that is brick texture. I haven't sorted out these ends, but that's okay. That's not going to worry about that for this tutorial. But anyway, there's our brick texture. Right, okay. We also want the concrete texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate these nodes. Shift D, just so I've got an extra set. This image texture, well, I'm going to bring in my concrete texture, just going to drag it in. Let me delete this one and put this one in its place. And then if I put that into material output, we should now see this concrete. Right. So I somehow want to mix them with a mask. So I've got my 2 shaders here. So I'm going to mix with a mix shader, not a mix RGB. So Shift A, shader and mix shader. And then I can plug these in. And what we're actually seeing here is like a 50-50 mix of both. We wanted a mask. We wanted basically to define where some areas would be all brick and other areas would be all concrete. So we need to control a factor of this, and we need to control that with a mask. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a random mask. I could do it with a texture. In fact, we'll do that a little bit after. But I'm just going to create this kind of random mask. So I'm going to add a noise texture, I think. Shift A, texture, noise. Okay. Let's add an emission node so we can see what's going on. Shift A, shader emission. And just pause a minute, plug that into the output. And plug the noise in. Okay. So I'm getting this noise texture. Scale it up a little. And let's add a color ramp. So converter color ramp. Let's kind of close these in a bit. Let's scale this down. Alright. Bring this in so it's near a kind of a black and white. Okay, so I'm getting this kind of black and white random texture on here that we're using as a mask. The other side's looking pretty good as well. Like I say, I'm not too worried about the edges at the minute, not for the tutorial. Right, okay, so we've got that. So instead of the emission, let me cut those links. We can plug this concrete and brick back into the material output, and then we can use this output of the color ramp as the factor. You can see what we're getting here is this kind of broken plaster concrete brick mix, which is actually looking pretty good and random, and maybe like a bit industrial. I don't have lighting and such. Must see now what happens now if let's add a bit of lighting and wait for this to catch up. Here we go. Let's find something a bit kind of occluded. Try that one, and let's go into render mode. So Shift C. Let me come to film so we take care of transparent. Let's add some more light to this so I can see a bit better. Let's try something a bit different here. Let's try this one. Okay, that's the dark side, that's the bright side. But anyway, you can see how we're getting this kind of concrete and brick mix, which is what we were looking for. Okay, we'll pause here for a while, have a chat about this, and then see where else we can take this.